Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Song called "The Mill is Made Out of Marble" by Joe Glazer. Well, a dream that I had died and gone to my reward, a drop in heaven's textile mill on a golden boulevard. And the mill was made out of marble, the machines were made of gold, and nobody ever grew tired. The mill was built in a garden, no dust nor dirt could be found. The air was clean, it smelled so sweet, with flowers and trees all around. It was quiet and peaceful in heaven. There was never a clatter or boom. We always had beautiful music while we worked at the spindle and loom. And the mill was made out of marble, the machines were made out of gold. Nobody ever grew tired, Lord, and nobody ever grew old. There was no unemployment in heaven. We worked steady all through the year. We always had food for the children. We were never haunted by fear. And the mill was made out of marble, the machines were made out of gold. Nobody ever grew tired, Lord, and nobody ever grew old. Well, I woke from a dream about heaven, wondered if there would it be a mill like that one here on earth for people like you and me. Yeah, the mill was made out of marble, the machines were made out of gold, and nobody ever grew tired, Lord, and nobody ever grew old. And the mill was made out of marble, the machines were made out of gold. Nobody ever grew tired, Lord, and nobody ever grew old.
Reading number 560, Commitment. People say, "What is the sense of our small effort?" They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do. Dorothy Day.
Good morning, folks of Terre Haute. I wish I were there in your sanctuary, because the sanctuary I am is hotter than hell, and your air conditioning is probably working. But I'm not because of this pandemic, which I hope for too long I'll be able to join you again for service and a meal together and see your faces and your smiles. I'm preaching today about Labor Day. I know that it's a week late, but in this days of pandemic, football's late, basketball's late, the Indianapolis 500 was late, so I don't think anybody can complain about a sermon being a week late on Labor Day. In your reading this morning by Marge Piercy, the last italic lines say, "The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real." Theologian Paul Tillich said in the 1960s that the greatest threat to humanity in the 20th century is meaninglessness. There's nothing that brings on meaningless more than work that is not real, that is not meaningful, that does not give you a sense of worth when you have accomplished it. And today in our society, many strive in such work. Glenda and I have been in a working class times in our lives. I drove truck 10, 12, 14 hours a day for 10 years. And Glenda worked in a glove factory, sewing gloves, and she hates to sew. And you'll hear about that in a song. But, we know the kind of work that you sit in a factory and do the same thing over and over and over again. And you wonder, where do you find worth in life? It's all a matter of money in America. Our jobs, everything we do, feeds the top, feeds the capitalist at the top. The same capitalist about which we raised Cain in the early 20th century to change child labor laws, working hours and so forth, the same capitalism that unions fought, that socialists fought in the early 20th century. One of those great socialists was Eugene V. Debs, our Terre, Haute native, and one of my heroes. He said, "I'm opposing a social order in which it is possible for one man who does absolutely nothing that is useful to amass a fortune of hundreds of millions of dollars, while millions of men and women who work all the days of their lives secure barely enough for a wretched existence," end quote. Debs would be shocked at the inequality and the great gap between the rich and the poor in our day. If you happen to see the Oscars, which I saw part of, and early on Chris Rock was there and gave a little speech, and he said, "We're glad to have Jeff Bezos in the crowd tonight. He's so rich that he just went through a divorce and he's still the richest man on the planet by twice over." That's the last you saw of Chris Rock at the Oscars. But the truth is that things have gotten so out of kilter that literally tens of thousands of children die of hunger-related diseases every single day, while Jeff Bezos sits on $400 billion, and many other. We have more billionaires than we had millionaires in Deb's days. An absurd race to the end of the monopoly game where one person has it all. One of the great novels of the 20th century was John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And there in that story of the Dust Bowl and the Joad family having to move with many, many thousands of others out of Oklahoma and out of the plains of the West, going to California to find another wretched existence. Tom Joad, one of the greatest speeches of anybody ever made was when Tom Joad was saying goodbye to his ma, and his ma was saying, "I don't know if I'll ever see you again." And Tom says, "Then it don't matter, Ma. Then I'll be all around in the dark. I'll be everywhere, wherever you look. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. Casey knowed why. I'll be the way guys yell when they were mad, and I'll be the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when our folks eat the stuff they raise and live in the houses they build, why, I'll be there." Throughout our history of the nation, there has always been those who were there, who were struggling to change, struggling to help bring a social order that served all the people instead of the few. Tom, she said, his ma said, us people will go on living when all them people is gone, talking about the rich. Tom, we're the people that live. They ain't going to wipe us out. Why, we're the people. We go on. I know, Ma, Tom said. Maybe that makes us tough. Rich fellas come up and they die, and their kids ain't no good, and they die out. But Tom, Ma said, we keep a coming. Don't you fret none, Tom. There's a different time coming. There's a different time coming. Steinbeck's work and many others talked about the labor unions and the struggle and the strikes to change the American economic landscape, and we still struggle with that today. But I remember the chant of the people of El Salvador when they were fighting for their revolution back in the 70s and 80s. The people united shall never be defeated. El pueblo unido nunca será derrotado. The people united shall never be defeated. Ma says about the rich man, if he needs 1 million acres to make him feel rich, seems to me he needs it because he feels awful poor inside himself. And if he's poor in himself, there ain't no 1 million acres going to make him feel rich. And maybe he's disappointed that nothing he can do will make him feel rich. Nothing he can do can make him feel rich. Probably the best description of the man we have sitting in the White House today. Never enough. Never get enough. Nothing will make him feel rich inside except to take, take, take. Deb says in every age it has been the tyrant, the oppressor, the exploiter who has wrapped himself in the cloak of patriotism or religion or both to deceive and overawe the people. He also said, I have no country to fight for. My country is the earth. I am a citizen of the world. Labor Day is a world day, not just a United States day. The Wobblies, the United Workers of the world, struggled in the 19th century and the 20th century to stop child labor, to bring about better rights for the worker, and won many battles. Sadly, in our days, the labor unions tended to count the words. They changed words. Labor unions, the Wobblies in the 1920s, the Debs movement, the railroad workers and all that, the primary word of their movement was solidarity. The same thing you saw in El Salvador of saying the people united shall never be defeated. That's solidarity, people united. Sadly, the capitalists knew how to take over the unions. Engine Charlie, General Motors, the richest man in America at the time, decided he had to negotiate, had to meet them halfway, and so we tied health care to our jobs. And people became slaves to the unions, to the factories. You couldn't move from one job if you were dissatisfied because you lose your health care. Engine Charlie was brilliant. He won that battle. And corporations tied our health care to our work so that we remained in place and did our work, did our job, even though the job was not of worth many times. It was just meaningless, repetitious, and boring. So, in this labor movement, throughout our history, there have been times when solidarity became the word again, instead of seniority. When I worked I was a Teamster and drove for RCA. And I was in the Teamsters Union. And every year at RCA, the plant would close down a couple of times a year for several weeks for retooling. But the union had set it up so the men with the highest seniority could bid all the hours they wanted. And when the plant shut down, there was no road, over-the-road trucking. There was no shipping to California and Texas and all the places in the world. And we had too many drivers. They would cut the workload back to just moving trailers at the plant. And the people at the top of the seniority board, the guys up the top, really capitalist, basically they had their contract written where they could bid as many hours a week as they wanted. So we had truck drivers working 120 hours a week sometimes at the factory here in Bloomington, just sitting in their trucks most of the night, but making over $100,000 a week, while the rest of us lower guys on the seniority board weren't making anything. And some guys had to quit their job and get another one to make their house payment. And so I talked with the shop steward one day at the plant, and I said, look, I figured this up. If we divvied up this work, if everybody in the trucking, our Teamsters, took a 10%, we took a 10% cut in pay, 10%, whatever it was, we were going to cut down to work 30 hours a week instead of 40. If everybody took a 10-hour-a-week cut, then there would be enough work for all of us to work 30 hours a week. And he said, well, Bill, we believe it's better to have 20 great jobs than 60 good jobs. And I said, that's not the way unions work. I said, don't you remember unions used to talk about solidarity? It was for every worker. And he said to me, well, those early unions were influenced by a lot of communists. I said, bingo. Yeah, he knew what it was. Capitalism won those battles in the end. And even though unions today are starting to wake up and starting to act again, we need to be ever vigilant and working on things. The song Bread and Roses that you sang this morning, first mention of that was in the American magazine in September 1911. It was in an article written by Helen Todd, who described how a group of women from the Chicago Women's Club, after listening to advice from Senator Robert La Follette, decided to initiate an automobile campaign around the state of Illinois for the right to women to vote in 1910. And in that time of women speaking around the state of Illinois, Helen Todd was one of the speakers. And when they're speaking on the condition of women's working conditions, that phrase of bread and roses was mentioned. And a young hired girl expressed to Helen Todd, who was staying with the hired girl's family overnight, that what she liked most about all the speeches was that it was about the women voting so everybody would have bread and flowers too. A young girl telling her that. Rose expresses bread for all and roses true, expresses the soul of the women's movement and explains the meaning of the phrase in her speech. She said, woman is the mothering element in the world, and her vote will go toward helping forward the time when life's bread, which is home, shelter, and security, and roses of life, music, education, nature, and books, shall be the heritage of every child that is born in the country, in the government of which she has a voice. End quote, by Helen Todd. The pitcher cries for water, and a person for work that is real. Work that is real. Now I'd like to give you an example of work that is unreal. It's a writing by Brian Doyle in a book called One Long River of Song. I encourage you to buy anything written by Brian Doyle. He's a Roman Catholic and he loves his faith, but even when he talks about his faith, this agnostic loves it because the writing is so good. And he is so right on. Here is a story. A man who was a soldier in the American Army in Iraq told it to me. A friend of his, one of his best and closest friends, was nearly pierced through by a bullet fired by a sniper. The bullet entered the friend's upper right chest just below the collarbone and plowed almost through to the back. American surgeons removed the bullet and discovered it was a 5.56 millimeter cartridge manufactured in Lake City, Missouri. The Lake City ammunition plant was founded by the Remington Arms Company in 1941. Today it is operated by Orbital Alliant Tech Systems, which averages $5 billion in sales annually and earns an average of about $500 million annually. Half of the 100 biggest weapons and ammunition manufacturers in the world are American companies. Orbital is one of these. Orbital sells 1.5 billion rounds of ammunition a year to the American Army and to the other armies around the world. Some of that ammunition is lost or stolen and shuffled clandestinely to all sorts of revolutionaries, criminals, gangs, and thugs. Freedom fighters are called, or insurgents against economic and cultural imperialism, though in many cases they are actually fighting to impose their own choice of oppression and tyranny empire over the people they live among. So let us review. A soldier, an American soldier, aged 22, is nearly pierced by a bullet made in America, sold for profit in America by an American company that makes $500,000 a year selling bullets and other weaponry to armies all over the world. The vast majority of the companies that make a tremendous profit every year selling bullets and weapons all over the world are American companies. Most of them are publicly traded, in which many other Americans are heavily invested. So the bullet that nearly pierced an American boy, a bullet that caused enormous pain, a bullet that permanently affected the use of his arm and shoulder, the bullet that cut a scar on his chest he will wear until the day he died, was made in America by American workers and paid for by American investors who profit handsomely by the sale of the bullet that executed its purpose by punching a hole the size of a quarter almost all the way through a boy from America. A 5.56 millimeter bullet can penetrate 15 to 20 inches through soft tissue meaning, for example, a boy. The bullet is prone to yaw, which means it skews easily from its direct path and is liable to fragment and go throughout, surgeons are seeing far worse wounds in soldiers these days than they saw in Vietnam. A 5.56 millimeter bullet is one of the reasons. A 5.56 millimeter bullet can punch nearly a half inch into steel and right through a bulletproof vest, and punch right through a human being of any size, shape, age, nationality, gender, religion, sexual orientation, combatant status, or not. Rarely does a writer speak bluntly ahead of time to people who will type furiously outraged insults in the comment section after this article is posted. But I will here and now. Dear outraged, shrieking lunatic, he writes, you who are about to lecture me on how this was just an accident, how it's a necessary part of the capitalist system, and how I am clearly a yellow liberal pansy. Are you only stupid or are you insane? What part of all this makes sense? What part of all this is not about profit? Why should America be the biggest weapons dealer on earth? Why do we lie about how this is directly linked to murders all over the world and how our own kids suffer and die from American weapons and ammunition? Is profit share more important than the lives of uncountable thousands of people all over the world who die from our weapons and ammunition? Are there no other products that all those American employees could possibly design and manufacture? Really? Have you ever been nearly pierced through by a 5.56 millimeter bullet? No? Then how do you have the unmitigated gall to say anything to me, you pompous ass? And I end quote by Brian Doyle. I grew up next to this Crane Naval Weapons Base, which my dad helped to build in the 1940s, and my family worked at for many years. Many of my friends worked there. It was the largest employer in southern Indiana. But the pitcher cries for water and a person for work that is real. What must it be like to know that I might spend 40 hours a week, that I might spend years of labor and retire from a job making materials that may kill my own friend, that will kill enemies, that basically is a weapon of death. And it goes from 5.56 ammunition to missiles to planes. Is that work real? Is that work meaningful? I hope that we can find a way in America end this madness. And I, as you know, I preach now with the Black Lives Matter slogan on my shirt until further notice. Because when I saw the film of George Floyd, when I heard the story of Breonna Taylor, and all the others we've seen across this country for year after year after year, and then I realized that over the last 2 to 3, 4 decades, we have militarized our police. And during the Trump administration, the amount of military weapons given to police departments is unbelievable. Tens of millions of dollars of military weapons issued to police departments across this country. And policemen are coming into a system that sees their own people as enemies. And that has to change. The pitcher cries for water to carry in a person for work that is real. What must it be like to spend your life in the arms manufacturer? What must it be like for a minister once told me just a few years ago that I should invest all my money into weapons manufacturing. I should change all that. Those are the ones that make money. He said, this is a preacher of the gospel telling me how to make money. Invest in arms companies. We have been so militarized. We have lost the sense of solidarity as a people. We have been individualized to make our own way, to have our own retirements, to build our own systems up so that we make sure that we're safe. And at all the time, what we are doing as a nation is making us unsafe. It is making the world unsafe for our children and our grandchildren. Labor has to be real. The pitcher wants to carry water, not acid, not poison. We need to find ways in this country to stop the violence, and in order to do that, the working class has to begin to remember that workers all over the world are really the same. It used to be the world workers going together in the early 19th century. We were struggling for a global community. As Deb said, I have no country to fight for. My country is the earth, and I am a citizen of the earth, of the world. That's where I am today. That's where I've come to. And I have to say, I'm just lucky to get here. I could be sitting down making weapons for a military to use somewhere in the world. It would have been the natural thing for me growing up right beside the base. But fortunately, I ran into people that changed my mind, changed my thinking. Fortunately, I had a librarian in the 7th grade, I believe, when I picked up my first Steinbeck book, and it was entitled In Dubious Battle, and I thought it was about war. And the librarian, instead of telling me, you're too young to read that book, she said to me, well, Billy, that's an adult book. But if it keeps your interest, you're old enough to read it. And it was about the labor issues in California. And I saw America from the underside through Steinbeck's eyes. And it took a long time for that fruit to come to get ripe in my mind and my heart. But fortunately, a librarian, a teacher, professor, people at work, fortunately there have been people in my life that made me stop. Say, what is it that I want? I want work that is real. I want work that reaches people, teaches people. I want work that heals a nation. I hope that you're paying attention this year. I hope that you vote this year. I hope that people all over America are looking for a new revolution. A revolution of values, a revolution that will bring about a world where the pitcher does not have to cry for water. The person does not have to look for work, but that all work becomes labor that is productive, is healing, is carrying. We really do need a real world, a new world. And a new world is possible. A new world is possible. Don't ever give up hope. Hang in there. What else have I had to say today? I don't know. It's been good to be with you. I again encourage you greatly to read Brian Doyle's works. He's one of the finest writers I've ever read in my life, and anything you pick up by him, I think you'll enjoy. Be well, walk in peace, and go out and change the world. That's all we got to do. Blessed be.
Cussing the clock at 5:30, pull on my jeans and my sweater. Cussing the clock at 5:30, pull on my jeans and my sweater. Hate to leave my baby laying in bed, but I gotta get my act together. Well, I brush my teeth and I comb my hair, holding on to my coffee cup. Well, I brush my teeth and I comb my hair, holding on to my coffee cup. Toast and honey and a country egg, gotta wake my body up. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the watching the clock now, minimum wage, Lord, sew a little faster blues. Sew a little faster, sew a little faster, sew a little faster blues. Another day, another dollar, ain't got a minute to waste. Another day, another dollar, ain't got a minute to waste. Soaking up all the fresh air that I can on my way to the factory place. Clocking into another world in the middle of a one-horse town. Clocking into another world in the middle of a one-horse town. Buzzer finds me sitting at my sewing machine. Time to put the hammer down. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the watching the clock now, minimum wage, Lord, sew a little faster blues. Sew a little faster, sew a little faster, sew a little faster blues. You got the hand, the palm, the fingers, and the thumb, around and around I go. You got the hand, the palm, the fingers, and the thumb, around and around I go. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I don't even like to sew. Well, I earn a few nickels and I buy a few beans, trying so hard not to complain. Well, I earn a few nickels and I buy a few beans, trying so hard not to complain. Laughing and talking with my factory friends, with the fuzz eating into my brain. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the blues, I got the glove factory blues. I got the watching the clock now, minimum wage, Lord, sew a little faster blues. Sew a little faster, sew a little faster, sew a little faster blues. Sew a little faster, sew a little faster, sew a little faster blues. Sew a little faster, sew a little faster, sew a little faster blues. I've got the glove factory blues.
Closing words, number 559. Someday, men and women will rise. They will reach the mountain peak. They will meet big and strong and free, ready to receive, to partake, and to bask in the golden rays of love. What fancy, what imagination, what poetic genius can foresee the potentialities of such a force in the life of men and women? Emma Goldman.
I can tell you right now that